Managing a team in and of itself is already a pretty difficult task. When you add the layer of like international time zones, it can get very messy. And so I wanted to share some reflections on basically how I approach this. I have worked remote with like remote teams since I've started working, and I run a team now. I run a software company. I've been running that for the last 2.5 years. I've worked with teams of different sizes. At one point, I had a lot of contractors, and I kind of cut down and focused on better but core employees. And now I have a team of about 5 people. And I think there are a couple like major principles that I keep in mind nowadays, which really help me and just how I approach things. But one of them is actually not having too many time zones, because there is a point beyond which scheduling and like the lack of overlap between time zones becomes too much. Usually I would define that there's like 3 major like land masses. Well, there's 2 major land masses, which are the Americas, and then Europe and the Eurasian continent. And then you have Africa, but Africa falls in line with Europe. So it's, in terms of time zones, that's okay. But once you get to like mixing Asia, Europe, and Americas, those 3 time zones, like very, very hard to mix. You have to choose a group. You either do like Asia, Europe, or Europe, Americas. Like it's very hard to do all 3. At least in my experience, I've been in a couple of those situations. Very, very challenging to coordinate between all and actually work productively. Because what happens very often is like, you tell somebody something, but it's the end of their day, and then you gotta wait for the next day, and it's a blocker for the whole team. Messes a lot of stuff up. The way I manage things is basically like, I do a call every day, a stand-up where I sync up with the team. And like my team is still, bear in mind, my team is still small enough where everybody's a direct report to me. And so I would still apply this logic for direct reports. I think you can scale that much, but like at 500 employees, maybe this will be different. But this is really just for people who have maybe small teams and want to optimize those a little bit better. And I basically have these daily stand-ups with them, and they can be literally 10-15 minutes long, or they can be an hour if there's more to discuss. But the point is, you make sure that that everybody's in the loop and everybody's like, they have a place to ask questions, get rid of blockers and things like that. And usually I try and position that at the start of the day as much as possible. So the soonest possible time where everybody has overlap. For me, that is 9:30 a.m. London time. That is 5:30 a.m. in Brazil. One of my Brazilian developers, I have one in Brazil, and he wakes up very early. So that happens to be possible. But if it wasn't that, maybe I'd do 10 or 11 a.m. depending on whenever, is the earliest time zone, whenever it's reasonable for them to wake up. Another thing that I have is a policy about like texting at any time. And I know there's, some people find it uncomfortable and they're like, oh, my boss shouldn't text me at XYZ time. I tell my team very clearly though, I will text you at any time, but I don't necessarily have expectations of you replying outside of work hours. And I try and make that as clear as possible, because it's like, if we're an international team, I need to be able to text you based on my working hours. And also just, I sometimes work at odd hours. So, who am I not to work at Saturday at 2 a.m? Why not? Like, I get to do that, but I don't expect them to necessarily reply at those times. And so there's a very clear thing of like, I expect you to reply during your working hours. Outside of that, if you do, great, that's bonus points, brownie points. But if not, no problem, I'm not gonna hold it against you. And then outside of that, I think also one of the like key principles is just don't micromanage. Let people go and do their own thing. And if you find yourself having to micromanage, that is probably a sign that you should get rid of somebody. I've noticed a lot of times micromanagement comes as a result of basically poor quality work. And you're like, okay, this person's not working enough. They're not working at the speed I want them, whatever. If that's the case, you need to find somebody better, because micromanaging, it just doesn't work. Like you demotivate the person, you waste your time. It's just headache, all around headache. When you hire the right people, you don't feel the need to micromanage because you learn to trust them. And so if you feel the need to micromanage, you need to try and trust. I trust somebody, they fuck up once, all right. They fuck up twice, okay. They fuck up 3 times, especially if it's the same fuck up. Like if it's a different one, okay, fine. They learned from their mistake, they didn't repeat it. If they keep making the same mistake, they're gone. Like at that point, I'm like, you need to be able to trust to let people do things. If they keep making the same mistakes and then you feel like, oh, if I don't micromanage, then they don't get stuff done, you just need to get rid of them. They're not going to do stuff. And so you're micromanaging them is such a waste of your time. It's one of the lowest, like you need 2 people to do the job of 1. That's what's happening, right? You need the person that does it and the micromanager to like constantly check in and all that. And like, you're basically using 1.5 worth of people hours to get one person's output. It's ridiculous. And so like from an efficiency point of view, I think that's one of the worst things that you can do. And like just let people work whatever hours they want. just make sure that you have that common time when you sync up and everybody syncs up on what's going on. I think that's been one of the best practices that I've done. And also part of the value of it is just getting to know the team personally and building real relationships. The reason I say that is because I know some people are like, make meetings as efficient as possible. I don't want to be in meetings all day. I want them fast, efficient. Like we have to have an agenda and the meetings at Amazon are super hyper organized, whatever. Yes, but that is because they have a platform to form the inter-work relationships outside of those meetings, because you see the person at the office, you say hi, you say good morning, how are you, what's up, all those things. You have no space for that interaction on just a Slack server, for example. Like it's not going to happen organically. And so like that face-to-face connection, you miss that. And so in the meeting, at some point in time, if you want to build some kind of connection, some kind of team culture between you guys, you need to make time in the meeting for this kind of like the banter, the jokes, the silly things, that relationship part of things will not form as organically as if you had an in-person company. And so if you have an in-person company, you can run 10-minute hyper-organized, like super productive to the point meetings. But if this is a team that you want to build a relationship with and you want to retain that team, you need them to enjoy working there. And part of the enjoyment comes from a social life. You will spend most of your life with your working colleagues. And so if you make a place where people like their working colleagues, the likelihood that they will stay there and produce better output is so much higher. I think that's very, very useful and something that most people neglect maybe to care about or think about. Yeah. Anyway, I think like those, just a couple little practices that I do that I think really help me manage my team in a way that like I really enjoy working with them and stuff gets done and it's very sustainable and it's a really good rhythm. And this is something I found through a lot of experimentation. I've been running my company for the last almost 3 years, but even before that, I was part of different kinds of teams in all kinds of situations. And yeah, I've experimented a lot with different kind of ways and meetings and whatever. And this has been by far kind of my favorite rhythm so far. It's just a couple of things. It's like have a simple meeting that you have on a daily basis, because you need to see these people on a daily basis. These are the people that make your company like work and run and produce. And so you better treat them well and you better know what's going on with them. Like even personally, just sometimes it's good. And don't micromanage. It's just such a pain. And like try and build real relationships. I think those 3 things super, super helpful. Also beyond that, one of the things I do are weekly surveys where I don't necessarily have time to catch up with everybody one-to-one, but I send out a weekly survey, which basically says like, hey, how's the week? How do you feel about it? Rate it from 1 to 5. How productive? How satisfied are you with your work? How satisfied are you overall? Like I try and keep it pretty short. And then I ask like, is there anything you'd like to chat about or anything? Like what was the most energy draining thing and things like that. And there's been a handful of times where I've been able to spot somebody's unhappiness earlier on and I quickly address it because of that little form. That's something that's super, super helpful. Like I can very quickly like diagnose that something is wrong with somebody and they don't feel great or something like that. And you have to go and treat that case as quickly as you can, basically, because if it lingers, productivity slows down and it's bad on all sides, because like your company produces less and the employee usually is having a less of a good time working. They're more stressed. There's something on their mind, whether that's you or a personal situation, doesn't matter, but like there's something on their mind. And it's not just about like economic output is lower for you. It's not just about self-interest, but also for them. It's like you as an employer are in a position to help a lot of people. You're in a position to help your entire team. And so I think it's worth like, just care about your team. Just give a shit. Like actually give a shit. Yeah. I think that's also really important. And you'd be surprised how many people don't. Like they just don't care. I think building relationships with the people that make your company run is so fundamental. It cannot be skipped. But yeah, anyway, if you thought this was useful, do subscribe. Apparently 85% of people who watch my videos are not subscribed. So I'd like to make that ratio a little bit lower. And I record every day. So if you write a comment, ask a question, the likelihood that I see it and make a video about it is relatively high. So feel free to do that.